Hey guys, so this was my first video that I ever recorded that I had my mic muted, so take two. Now, Shaman are getting some nerfs on Tuesday. We're going to go over those today. We're going to go over some possible options for you to swap into, and we're going to have a discussion about these nerfs and how it's impacting Shaman. But before we start, if you're not already following me over at Twitch, be sure to do that so that way you can catch all of this live at twitch.tv/metallurgy. So, the first thing you'll notice here, these are posted on Wowhead, by the way, that I'm getting these from. Enhance all ability damage is reduced by 3%. So, you know, you're thinking, well, 3%, not that bad. Well, first of all, that's across the board, so that's all damage. After they've already gotten, I think, what was it, 25%. But now there's also these. So, enhancement reduces the damage of Ellie Blast by 15% in PvP combat. And this is actually pretty significant here. Primordial Wave causes your next lightning bolt to hit all targets with Flame Shock for 75% of normal damage instead of 150. So that's half. So the Primordial Wave burst with Lightning Bolt, which if you don't know, you get Flame Shock on all three targets, kind of similar to Elemental with your Lava Burst, but instead of hitting them with Lava Bursts, you hit them with Lightning Bolt. Now, Lightning Bolt was hitting pretty chunkily, and it can hit all three targets, so you were able to, I remember in the beta, you were able to one-shot all three targets with Lightning Bolt using this. But the Elemental Blast damage nerf is also pretty significant. So, before we get into that, Elemental also getting damage reduced by 15%. Now, we're going to have a discussion about the enhancement side of things first, because we're going to spend most of the time in the Elemental and just Shaman overall. So, here's my enhancement tree here. This is the build that I was running, doing some melee turbo cleave. So Ellie Blast here getting nerfed 15%, and then your Primordial Wave is getting nerfed by half. So those are pretty significant changes, and you're also getting nerfed by 3% across the board. But the thing is, I don't really see this build changing very much, because there aren't any really other viable options. So if you go down like the Lava Lash side, like this tree over here with maybe Hailstrom and stuff, you get a lot of Lava Lash damage, which is more sustained damage. But now you're not having any burst, and enhancement kind of relies on the burst damage because it has such a lack of defensives that what you need to do is you need to kind of like hit and run. You need to jump in with like your Feral Lunge and maybe your Spirit Walk to try to get rid of any roots. Maybe they root you while you're trying to do your burst. And you got to get in that huge burst of damage, and then you got to kind of like retreat. You got to back up. You can't just stay out in the open field, especially against like a shadow play comp. And then you gotta like wait a little bit, get another set of like maybe mini cooldowns, like maybe your Feral Spirits and your Doom Winds comes up. Then you can go out and maybe get a little bit of burst off with that while you're waiting for your Ascendants, and then wait for that because it's a multiple, so then you can get all your cooldowns again. Anyways, I don't really see this changing because you need the burst damage. So even though it's getting nerfed pretty hard, I think you're still going to be running this. Now, I could be wrong. Let me know what you guys think about the enhancement side of things. I haven't run it too much, so I'm not like 100% positive about that, but I just don't see it really changing, even with the nerfs. This really sucks for enhancement because, like, while it did need nerfed, yes, they didn't replace it with anything. So, like, yes, the burst was too strong. I mean, it's pretty crazy that you could get 10 Maelstrom stacks like instantly with your burst for like 3 times in a row, and you could do like 2 Elemental Blasts and then a Lightning Bolt and like hit all targets for like insane damage like constantly. So that did need nerfed, but at the same time they didn't replace it with anything. So now you're lacking in defensives, you're lacking in burst damage compared to other classes. Like look at Rogues and Windwalkers, which we'll also get to Windwalkers in a minute. And now you don't really have any sustained damage, because without your defensives, you can't do sustained damage. And without sustained damage, you don't have any constant pressure. Without your burst, now you don't have anything. And so while enhancement's still going to have some strong burst, yes, but compared to other classes that could just as easily be taken, I feel like enhancement is just going to be pretty gutted after this. Obviously people will still run enhancement and still do well with it, but I think you're going to need to be a much better player now in order to survive and do as much damage as, say, someone like a Fury Warrior would be able to do with their insane self-healing. And while enhancement does have insane self-healing, yes, like all of it relies on you dealing damage. So your healing surge, you got to get like 5 Maelstrom stacks in order to heal yourself, and your ancestral guidance, it's based on the damage that you do or the healing that you do, but it's going to be mostly based off the damage. And even then, it doesn't even heal for a whole lot. So unless your healing surge is crit, which maybe you need like focused insight here for that extra little bit of healing, then you're gonna then you're gonna be kind of fucked. So this is already running with swelling waves, and I don't know, maybe you need to start running spectral recovery to try to get away or something. I'm not sure. We're gonna have to definitely test it out a little bit, but I think enhance is just gonna be picked less now. They didn't replace it with anything, and I think they should have. So Windwalker Monk is kind of getting the same treatment. So Strike of the Windlord was nerfed by I think 30%. But it's funny because that wasn't even like their version of Ellie Blast. Like Thunder Fist, I think, was doing more damage than Strike of the Windlord, and I think that's what was giving them their like one-shot burst. So they still have like that option. They just got some of their burst nerfed. They didn't get like the primary culprit. And I could be wrong on that, but I feel like they should have been both nerfed, and they should have gotten more sustained damage, because all this one-shotty, bursty bullshit I think is bad for the game. I think it's stupid. There's like no counterplay within like a 1-second global. It's just really bad. It's not how I want to play a game. I don't want to play a game revolving around having to keep your eyes glued to the screen for that 1-second combo that you have to watch out for. I just think that's horrible for the game. So like, if they're gonna nerf that stuff for Windwalker Monks, again, they need to give them like some kind of utility or defensive in replacement of that, or give them some like more sustained damage. Now, the difference between Monk and Shaman, I think, is that Monks already have a lot more defensives and utility than Shamans do, surprisingly. So while Shamans have a lot of like roots and slows and stuff they can do, Monks have like, it's funny because you always think of Monks as super squishy, but they actually have more defensives than Shamans. So they have Touch of Karma, which not only damages the enemy but also heals you if you're running good karma, and has an absorption shield. They got Dampen Harm, Fuse Magic, 2 teleports, and better self-healing than a fucking elemental shaman. So Vivify, like, it might not do as much healing in one cast as much as an elemental shaman. They can use it forever. Whereas an Ellie shaman, you use like 3 healing surges and you're already out of mana. So it's pretty crazy that, like, we always think about monks as weak and like defensively, but then you just think about a shaman, it's like, well, what do we have? We have Astral Shift. Oh boy. And this is if you're speccing into Plains Traveler, which reduces the cooldown and increases its duration. If you spec into Astral Bulwark, that brings it from 40%, which is like fucking nothing, to 55%. And you can maybe get it up to like 60% as Elemental when you're running the one Elemental talent up top, which we'll also get into here in a little bit. But your Earth Ellie will increase your max health by 15%. That's it. That's your only defensives right there. Astral Shift and Earth Elemental. That's why I have them right here on this keybind, this G keybind. Then you got your self-healing, which that's not a defensive, but it will help keep enhancement alive a little bit longer. But then you also have to sacrifice your damage for your healing. So in order to survive as enhancement, you have to sacrifice your damage. Whereas like a Fury Warrior doesn't have to do that. A Fury Warrior has, I've seen them do more healing than some of the healers in these games. it's just ridiculous that they can like have all this offensive pressure and damage while healing themselves. Whereas Shaman, they don't do that. You have to sacrifice your instant elemental blast or lightning bolts for your healing surges. Now, we're gonna get into the elemental tree. So, LE Blast was also nerfed for elemental, which I think is a good thing. I think that it's good that, again, these one-shotty mechanics are getting nerfed. I got killed by an elemental blast the other day. It was a 250k crit. And so while these shamans are running like 18% crit, like that's a very low chance to crit an LE Blast. But he got it because the rogue stunned me, and then there's no counterplay. He stuns me after I use my trinket. Well, what now? What do you do when you're already fighting an overpowered assassination rogue? Like, you have to trinket their first go, otherwise you'll just die, because I play smoke bomb and they got cloak of shadows, so you can't use any elemental damage. I can use my earth LE stun, but usually he just trinkets right out of that in the opener too, because they know how fucking strong they are. And so I have to trinket, and then he stuns me again, and then by like the time that the rogue has already done all this setup and I've summoned like half my defensives already, the shaman's already prepped his elemental blast, and then he gets a free use on it because I can't use a grounding totem while I'm stunned. I can't use anything while I'm stunned. I can't even use my defensive while I'm stunned. So shamans are pretty neglected when it comes to all of that. Now, again, the elemental blast nerf is a good thing, but they didn't replace it with anything. Now, the only reason I'm not as mad at that as I am is because LE has other very strong viable builds. So you all know by now probably the build that I use, mostly this one. I have a bunch of other builds, but they're mostly for the shaman tree. So like this tree doesn't really ever change except for maybe these two talents here, depending on if I plan on doing more self-healing. But mostly they'll stay here, because having 5% passive damage reduction all the time and being able to stay in Spirit Wolf, like Spirit Wolf here, and have Ancestral Wolf Infinity is pretty strong combo. But the things that I probably would change, so you're gonna be wanting to go down the lightning tree more. So this is the build that you're probably going to be running now instead of the LE Blast build. So if you like the more bursty setup, you probably want to run this. So you still get Skybreakers, you're still running Deeply Rooted Elements, you get Primal Elementalist, you're still running Primordial Surge, but now you're also getting Stormkeeper. So now your lightning bolts are doing more damage, and you have your Stormkeeper, which will give you a little bit of extra burst. So you get 2 lightning bolts. The only problem is this is kind of predictable because you can see Stormkeeper being cast. Whereas Primordial Wave, you can actually cast that on yourself for a heal, and you'll still get the buff for your lava burst damage. So that's kind of a sneaky way, if you don't know that already, to use your Primordial Wave. So if you're afraid of using Primordial Wave on an enemy and them seeing it and then trying to counter it, you could just use it on yourself. But you only really want to do that if you already have Flame Shocks out. So if you have like 1 Flame Shock, you probably don't want to use this on yourself, because now you have to apply probably 2 more. And it also depends on your CC. Like, are you trying to CC the healer on your go, or are you just trying to get a lot of cross damage, like some cleave damage across all of them, and then CC 1 and then have your other DPS in your comp burst? That's entirely dependent on what you guys are doing in the game. But that's a sneaky way you can use this, whereas Stormkeeper, you can't really hide that. But this is a good, strong, bursty build. But again, I don't really like this build as much. I think the lava build is more fun. So this is the build that I primarily run. So you get some Echo Chamber, which gives you more overload damage, which you're getting more lava burst overloads from Flow of Power. You're getting 20% increased damage on your Primordial Surge, your burst through Flux Melting when you cast a Frost Shock. You're still keeping Primal Elementalist and Skybreakers and your Deeply Rooted Elements. So it's basically just shifting the damage from your Stormkeeper burst into your sustained lava burst damage. So you might be thinking, well, wouldn't we want more burst damage? Well, this still is burst damage, but now instead of tying it together with a 1 minute cooldown, you're just kind of buffing your Primordial Wave a little bit, and it's going to be about a 30-second cooldown. So it says 45, but you have Rolling Magma, which reduces the cooldown on Primordial Wave. So it's about 30-ish seconds that you'll be able to burst pretty reliantly and have some pretty strong, consistent burst damage. So this is like consistent burst. It's not just sustained damage, it's consistent burst. And then Stormkeeper would just add a little bit more burst on top of that. But I don't really see anyone running the Elemental Blast Burst build anymore. I'm sure some people still will, especially just to test it out. But I think once people realize how much setup you need, how counterable it is, the lacking in damage it has versus the risk. So like it's got a high, very high risk reward structure. So you have to risk a lot. You're risking all of your sustained damage for one shot, basically, at a one shot. And if you don't nail that, then you gotta wait again. You gotta wait until your Nature's Swiftness comes off cooldown, or if you can get lucky and get an Elemental Blast cast, which is scary because if you get locked out of Ele Blast, then you're locked out of everything. But then you also have to wait for like your Primordial Wave and your Stormkeeper. Like you have to have all of this ready, because now you have to use your elemental equilibrium in order to buff with Lightning Rod and your Electrified Shocks from Ice Fury. All that together, and trying to get that consistently nailed after they already have seen it probably the first time is probably going to be pretty difficult to pull off. So I don't think I'm going to be seeing a lot of Elemental Blast builds anymore. I'm going to probably be seeing more Stormkeeper builds and this build here. But yeah, so those are my thoughts. I think Shamans are in a tricky spot right now because yes, our damage is good, but that's literally all we have besides like some utility against melee classes. But other than that, we don't really have a whole lot. We have like a Hex, but you have to hardcast Hex. And the only way you can really ever get off Hex is if you are fighting a Caster Cleave or you spec into Spirit Walker's Aegis here, which I have been running a lot more of. I've also been running a lot of Unleashed Shield here. So Unleashed Shield has been a savior because there's been so many melee cleaves so far in the season. And if you don't know, if you run Elemental Orbit here, so you can have Earth and Lightning Shield on at the same time, and you use Unleashed Shield, it'll use both effects. So you'll knock them away with the Lightning Shield effect and root them in place with the Earth Shield effect. So super useful. It's basically like a Thunderstorm Earth Grab single target combo. And it's on a 30-second cooldown. So this is super useful, super handy. That with Static Field Totem and Spirit Walker's Aegis with your Hex basically guarantees you to not die in the at least the opener. When you pair it with your defensives, probably you're gonna, if you get a Fury Warrior with Kyrian Spear, you're basically fucked. You can't walk out of it, so you're probably gonna have to start off with your defensives there. But yeah, those have been super useful. Now let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below, what you think about the changes, whether or not you think Shaman deserved them or not. I think they did deserve them, but I think they should have been given something else in replacement of that, because without the burst damage, Shamans are lackluster in other areas. Mostly enhancement. I don't think Elemental is as bad off as enhancement is now, but I still think that Shamans need a little bit of help defensively. Let me know what builds you think are going to change, mostly for enhancement. I already kind of went over the other two viable builds for Elemental. I don't think enhancement is really going to change, even though they got nerfed. I think that they still need that burst damage. I think any other build really is going to be way too sustained, but I could be wrong. Again, I'm more familiar with Elemental than enhancement, but So these are just my opinions. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys later. Hopefully no more nerfs.